My name is Samantha Bennett, 32 years old, and my entire life nearly fell apart when my mother-in-law tried to sell the house from under me. After promising me that our family home would always be safe, my husband David and his mother Patricia orchestrated a plan behind my back that resulted in my home being listed for sale without my knowledge or consent. Patricia thought she had everything under control as always, but this time she went too far. The consequences were far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Before I continue my story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more family secrets nobody tells. I met David Bennett 8 years ago at a charity fundraiser in Boston. He was charming, successful, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. We hit it off immediately, and within a year, we were engaged. His mother, Patricia, was always polite but distant with me. I attributed it to her traditional values and thought she'd warm up to me eventually. David worked at his family's investment firm alongside his father, Richard, who had built the company from nothing. Richard was always kind to me. Unlike Patricia, who scrutinized everything I did, Richard made me feel welcome in the family. He often told me that he appreciated how I supported David and brought balance to his life. We married in a lavish ceremony that Patricia insisted on planning. I didn't mind much. I was in love and eager to start our life together. David's father gifted us our wedding present, a beautiful colonial house in an upscale neighborhood that had been in their family for generations. Richard had renovated it specifically for us. "This house is for you and David to build your life in," Richard said when he handed us the keys. "It's in both your names, Samantha. No matter what happens, you'll always have a home." Patricia didn't look pleased when Richard said this, but she smiled tightly and said nothing. At the time, I thought she was just emotional about her son moving into a new stage of life. The first few years of our marriage were wonderful. David and I settled into our careers. He at the family firm and me at a publishing house where I worked as an editor. We traveled, entertained friends, and discussed starting a family. Patricia's coldness toward me never quite thawed, but Richard more than made up for it with his warmth and support. Then, 3 years ago, Richard was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive, and within 6 months, he was gone. The loss devastated all of us, but it seemed to hit David particularly hard. He became withdrawn, staying late at the office and bringing work home on weekends. I tried to be supportive, understanding that he was not only grieving his father, but also adjusting to new responsibilities at the firm. Patricia became a more frequent presence in our lives after Richard's death. She would drop by unannounced, call David multiple times a day, and somehow always manage to interrupt any private time we had together. It felt intentional, but whenever I mentioned it to David, he dismissed my concerns. "She's just lonely without Dad," he'd say. "She needs us right now." I understood grief. I'd lost my own parents in a car accident when I was in college, so I knew how important family support could be during those dark times. I tried to be patient with Patricia's increasing presence in our lives, even as she subtly criticized my cooking, my housekeeping, and eventually, my career. "Wouldn't it be nice if you could be home more?" she said one evening over dinner. "David works so hard. He deserves to come home to a well-kept house and a hot meal, don't you think?" David didn't defend me. He just looked uncomfortable and changed the subject. That should have been my first warning sign. About a year after Richard's death, I began to notice other changes in David. He became secretive about his phone, turning it face down whenever I entered the room. Our intimacy dwindled, and he started taking business trips that hadn't been necessary before. When I asked about these changes, he blamed stress and the expanded responsibilities at work. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that we were just going through a rough patch, that things would get better once he adjusted to his new role at the company and processed his grief over his father. So I waited, tried to be patient, and focused on my own career, which was flourishing. I'd been promoted to senior editor and was working with some of our most prestigious authors. What I didn't know then was that while I was trying to be understanding and supportive, David and Patricia were making plans that would upend my entire life. I first realized something was seriously wrong when I came home early from work one day and found Patricia in our home office, going through our financial documents. She looked startled when I walked in, quickly shuffling papers back into a folder. "Patricia, what are you doing here?" I asked, setting my bag down. "And why are you going through our files?" "Oh, Samantha, you scared me," she said with a forced laugh. "David asked me to find some documents for him. Something about the house insurance." It was a plausible excuse, but something felt off. David had never mentioned needing insurance documents, and Patricia had never been the type to run errands for anyone, even her beloved son. "I can help him find whatever he needs when he gets home," I said, holding out my hand for the folder. Patricia clutched it tighter. "No need, dear. I've already found what he was looking for. I'll just take these to him at the office." Before I could object further, she brushed past me and left. I stood in the office, feeling uneasy, but unable to pinpoint exactly why. I opened the filing cabinet and noticed that several folders were out of place or missing entirely. Our property deed folder was empty. I called David immediately. He didn't pick up. I texted him about Patricia's visit and asked about the insurance documents. His reply came almost an hour later. "Just helping Mom organize some family paperwork. Nothing to worry about." But I was worried. That night, I waited for David to come home so we could talk. He arrived late, after 10 p.m., looking tired and irritable. "What's going on with the house documents?" I asked as soon as he walked in. "Your mother was here going through our files today." David sighed and loosened his tie. "Mom's just helping me sort through some of Dad's estate matters. There are still some things that need to be transferred and organized. But why would our house documents be part of that? Richard gifted us this house 3 years ago. It's already transferred to our names." "It's complicated, Sam," he said, using the diminutive form of my name that he knew I disliked. "There are some tax implications we need to address. Mom's helping because she dealt with all this stuff when Dad was alive." His explanation sounded rehearsed, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. David had always been a terrible liar. His ears turned red, just as they were now. "I think you should tell me what's really going on," I said, crossing my arms. "Because I'm getting the feeling that you and your mother are hiding something from me." "You're being paranoid," he snapped. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you. You always overreact to everything involving my mother." I was taken aback by his hostility. This wasn't like David at all, or at least not like the David I thought I knew. "I'm not overreacting. I'm asking a simple question about why your mother was going through our personal documents without my knowledge." David ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Look, I'm exhausted. Can we talk about this tomorrow? I need a shower and some sleep." He walked away before I could respond, effectively ending the conversation. I stood in our living room, feeling a growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. Something was definitely wrong, and I needed to find out what. The next day, I called in sick to work and waited until David left for the office. Then I began searching our home for clues. I checked David's desk drawers, his nightstand, and even the pockets of his suits. I felt terrible invading his privacy this way, but my instincts were screaming that I needed to protect myself. In the back of his sock drawer, I found a small key I didn't recognize. It looked like it might open a safety deposit box. I also found a business card for a real estate agent tucked into his wallet, with a handwritten note on the back. "All set for May 15th. P is handling the paperwork." May 15th was just 2 weeks away. P had to be Patricia. But what was all set? And what paperwork was she handling? I decided to do something I'd never done before. I logged into David's email account. We knew each other's passwords for emergencies, though we'd respected each other's privacy until now. But this felt like an emergency. What I found confirmed my worst fears. There were dozens of emails between David and Patricia, as well as communications with a real estate agent and a woman named Vanessa. The emails discussed listing our house for sale, with a closing date of May 15th. There were also emails about a new condo purchase, with Vanessa copied on many of them. My hands shook as I scrolled through email after email, each one revealing more of their plan. David and Patricia had been working with a real estate agent for months to sell our home. My home. The condo they were discussing was in a downtown high-rise, and from the way they talked about it, it was clear that I wasn't part of the equation. But it was the emails with Vanessa that truly broke my heart. They were intimate, loving, the kind of messages David used to send me when we first fell in love. In one particularly painful exchange, David wrote about starting fresh with her once he sorted out his current situation. That's what I was to him now, a situation to be sorted out. I printed key emails and documents, then carefully logged out of his account and put everything back exactly as I had found it. I needed time to think, to plan my next move. I couldn't confront David without considering all the implications first. If they were planning to sell our house, what did that mean for me? Where did they expect me to go? I remembered Richard's words at our wedding. "This house is for you and David to build your life in. It's in both your names, Samantha. No matter what happens, you'll always have a home." Had Richard suspected something like this might happen? Had he put my name on the deed specifically to protect me from exactly this scenario? I needed to see the deed for myself. Since the folder was missing from our home office, I decided to go to the county records office. There, I requested a copy of our property deed and waited anxiously as the clerk searched their database. "Here you are, Mrs. Bennett," the clerk said, handing me several pages. "The deed for 47 Maple Avenue." I thanked her and took the documents to a quiet corner to review them. My name was indeed on the deed, alongside David's. We were listed as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, which meant that neither of us could sell the property without the other's consent. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by anger. How exactly had David and Patricia planned to sell the house without my signature? As I continued reading, I discovered something unexpected. A special clause that Richard had included in the deed. It stated that if either party attempted to sell or transfer the property without the other's written consent, their interest in the property would automatically transfer to the non-offending party. Richard hadn't just put my name on the deed, he'd created a legal safeguard that would give me full ownership of the house if David tried to sell it behind my back. I wondered if David even knew about this clause. Had he read the deed carefully? Or had he simply assumed he could do whatever he wanted with family property? I folded the deed copy and placed it securely in my purse. I needed legal advice before making my next move. Fortunately, I knew exactly who to call. Richard's longtime friend and attorney, James Wilson. James agreed to meet me that afternoon. His office was in a historic building downtown, with dark wood paneling and leather-bound law books lining the walls. He greeted me warmly, though his expression grew concerned as I explained the situation. "I always worried about something like this," James said after I finished. Richard did too, especially in the last year of his life. "What do you mean?" I asked, surprised. James hesitated, then opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Richard left this with me before he passed away. He asked me to give it to you if you ever came to me with concerns about David or Patricia trying to take the house from you." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Richard's distinctive handwriting. "Dear Samantha, if you're reading this, then my concerns about David and his mother have proven valid. I've watched Patricia influence my son all his life, rarely for the better. I had hoped marriage to someone as strong and kind as you would break that hold. But I fear old patterns run deep. The house I gave you both was meant to be your sanctuary, your security. The special clause in the deed is my attempt to protect you from exactly the situation you're likely facing now. But I've taken one additional step. I've established a trust in your name, containing funds sufficient to cover any legal expenses you might incur in defending your right to the home, as well as enough to maintain the property for at least 10 years. Patricia doesn't know about this trust. Neither does David. It was funded from my personal accounts, not the family business. You've been the daughter I always wished for, Samantha. Whatever happens with you and David, please know that you will always be family to me. With love and respect, Richard." Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. Even from beyond the grave, Richard was looking out for me. His foresight and kindness overwhelmed me. James gave me a moment to compose myself, then explained the details of the trust and outlined my legal options. The clause in the deed was legally binding. If David and Patricia had taken steps toward selling the house without my consent, I could potentially claim full ownership. We'll need evidence of their intentions, James advised. Emails, text messages, anything showing they were actively trying to sell the property without your knowledge or consent. I have those, I said, pulling out the printed emails. And there's more on his computer. James reviewed the documents, his expression grave. This is damning, Samantha. But we need to be strategic about how we proceed. If you confront David now, he might destroy evidence or try to force you out of the house. What do you suggest? I asked. Let them continue thinking their plan is working. Meanwhile, we'll document everything and prepare legal filings that can be submitted the moment they make an official move toward selling. We should also have someone watch the house when you're not there. I don't trust Patricia not to try something underhanded. James recommended a private investigator named Rachel Morgan, who specialized in family law cases. Rachel was professional, discreet, and thorough, exactly what I needed in this situation. She agreed to monitor David's activities and gather additional evidence about his relationship with Vanessa. If he's planning to leave you for another woman, that could be relevant in divorce proceedings, Rachel explained, especially if he's been diverting marital assets to her. The thought of divorce made my chest tighten. Despite everything, a part of me still loved David, or at least the person I thought he was. But I couldn't deny the evidence in front of me. The man I married was plotting to discard me like an outdated appliance with his mother's enthusiastic help. For the next week, I maintained a facade of normalcy. I went to work, made dinner, and pretended I didn't notice David's late nights or secretive phone calls. It was the hardest acting job of my life. Every smile felt like it might crack my face. Every casual question about his day was carefully crafted to reveal nothing of what I knew. Rachel kept me updated daily. She confirmed that David was indeed seeing Vanessa Williams, a junior partner at his firm. They met for lunch almost every day and spent evenings together when David claimed to be working late. Rachel also discovered that David had opened a separate bank account and had been transferring small amounts from our joint accounts. Never enough to raise suspicion, but it added up to over $50,000 in the past year. James worked on preparing legal documents, ready to file at a moment's notice. He also helped me secure my own financial future by opening new accounts in my name only and transferring my personal savings. It's not being underhanded, he assured me when I expressed guilt. It's self-preservation. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. 10 days after I discovered their plan, I came home to find Patricia sitting in my living room with a man I didn't recognize. David was standing by the fireplace, looking simultaneously guilty and defiant. "Samantha," Patricia said with false warmth, "I'm glad you're home. This is Mr. Reynolds from Coastal Realty. He's going to be listing the house next week." I set my bag down slowly, my heart pounding. "Is that so?" I kept my voice calm, remembering James's advice to let them reveal their full plan before showing my hand. "Yes," David said, stepping forward. "Mom and I have been discussing it, and we think it's time for a change. This house is too big for just the two of us, and there's a beautiful condo downtown that would be perfect." "The two of us?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. David glanced at Patricia, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Well, yes," he continued. "I know it seems sudden, but I've been thinking about this for a while. We've grown apart, Samantha. I think we both know that. And the house my father-in-law gave us as a wedding present? The home we were supposed to build our life in? What happens to that?" "It's a family property," Patricia interjected smoothly. "It's always been Bennett family property. Richard just let you live here." "That's not true, Patricia," I said, still maintaining my composure. "Richard gave this house to both of us. My name is on the deed." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "A technicality. David is Richard's son and heir. The house goes where he goes." Mr. Reynolds looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Perhaps I should come back another time," he suggested, gathering his portfolio. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Reynolds," I said. "There isn't going to be a listing. Not now, not next week, not ever. At least not without my consent. Patricia's face hardened. Don't be difficult, Samantha. David has made his decision. The house is being sold. You'll get a fair settlement in the divorce, of course. Divorce? I looked at David, who couldn't meet my eyes. Is that what this is about? You want a divorce so you can be with Vanessa? David's head snapped up, shock evident on his face. How do you know about Vanessa? I know everything, David. About Vanessa, about the condo you've been looking at together, about the separate bank account you've been funneling our money into. And most importantly, I know about the special clause in our deed, the one your father included specifically to prevent something like this. The color drained from David's face. Patricia stood up, her hands clenched into fists. What are you talking about? What clause? I reached into my bag and pulled out the copy of the deed, handing it to Mr. Reynolds. Perhaps you'd like to read Section 7, Paragraph 3, Mr. Reynolds. It's quite illuminating about what happens if either of us tries to sell this property without the other's consent. Mr. Reynolds adjusted his glasses and read the indicated section. His eyebrows rose and he looked up at me with new respect. Mrs. Bennet is correct. According to this clause, any attempt to sell or transfer the property without both parties' written consent results in the entire interest transferring to the non-offending party. He turned to David. Mr. Bennet, if you proceed with listing this house without your wife's consent, you will legally forfeit your claim to it entirely. Patricia snatched the deed from Mr. Reynolds and scanned it frantically, her face growing redder by the second. This can't be right, she sputtered. Richard wouldn't do this. But he did, I said calmly. Richard knew exactly what kind of people you both are. He saw it long before I did. David took the deed from his mother, reading the clause for himself. The shock on his face confirmed what I had suspected. He'd never bothered to read the document carefully. He'd assumed, as he always did, that his name and his family connections were enough. Mr. Reynolds, I continued, I think it's best if you leave now. As you can see, this is a family matter that needs to be resolved privately. The realtor nodded, clearly relieved to escape the tension in the room. Of course, I'll see myself out. He gave David an apologetic look before hurrying toward the door. Once he was gone, Patricia rounded on me. You think you're so clever, don't you? Using Richard's misguided generosity against his own son. It wasn't misguided, I replied. It was prescient. Richard knew exactly what might happen after he was gone. He knew you'd try to control David, and that David might be weak enough to let you. How dare you? Patricia hissed. After everything our family has done for you. Your family, I interrupted. Richard was the only one who ever treated me like family. You've been trying to undermine my marriage from day one. David, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Sam, be reasonable. This relationship isn't working anymore. We both know that. Why drag this out? We can come to an arrangement that's fair to everyone. Fair? I laughed bitterly. Was it fair to go behind my back with Vanessa? Was it fair to drain our accounts? Was it fair to plan to sell our home without even talking to me about it? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. But you're right about one thing. This relationship isn't working anymore. Not after what you've done. I pulled another set of documents from my bag, the divorce papers James had prepared. These are divorce papers drawn up by James Wilson, your father's attorney and my attorney now. They stipulate that I retain full ownership of this house, as per the clause in the deed that you've now triggered. They also outline the financial settlement I'm entitled to, given your infidelity and financial misconduct. David's face went pale. You went to James, behind my back? Yes, just like you went to Vanessa behind mine. The difference is that what I did was to protect myself, while what you did was to betray me. Patricia reached for the divorce papers, but I pulled them back. These aren't for you, Patricia. They're for your son, the man I married, the man who promised to love and cherish me until death. This is ridiculous, Patricia sputtered. You can't possibly think you'll get away with this. We have connections, influence. So do I countered. Thanks to Richard. Did you know he set up a trust for me? One that neither of you knew about? It's more than enough to cover any legal expenses if you want to fight this. But before you decide to do that, you should know that I have evidence of everything. The affair, the financial diversion, the conspiracy to sell the house. How do you think that would look to the partners at the firm? To your social circle? To the clients who trusted the Bennett name because of Richard's reputation for integrity? The threat hung in the air between us. David and Patricia had always cared deeply about appearances, about what others thought of them. The prospect of public scandal clearly terrified them both. David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of defeat. "What do you want, Samantha?" "I want what Richard intended me to have. This house and a fair financial settlement. I want a divorce that acknowledges your infidelity and financial misconduct. And I want both of you to leave my home right now." "This is absurd," Patricia began, but David touched her arm, silencing her. "Let's go, Mom," he said quietly. "We need to think about this." As they gathered their things to leave, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Vindication, sadness, and something like relief. The life I had built with David was over, but at least now I could face that truth honestly. At the door, David paused and looked back at me. "I did love you, you know, in the beginning." "I know," I said. "I loved you too. But love isn't enough when there's no trust, no respect." After they left, I walked slowly through the house. My house now. Each room held memories, some good, some newly tainted by the revelations of the past few weeks. In the kitchen, where we'd cooked countless meals together. In the living room, where we'd entertained friends and family. In the bedroom, where we'd shared our most intimate moments. I ended up in Richard's old study, which we'd preserved largely as it was when he was alive. His presence seemed strongest here, among his books and the photographs on his desk, including one of him and me at a company picnic, both of us laughing at some forgotten joke. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room, "for seeing what I couldn't see, for protecting me when I didn't know I needed protection." I sat in his leather chair, feeling the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. The fight wasn't over. I knew David and Patricia well enough to know they wouldn't surrender easily. But for the first time in weeks, I felt ready for whatever came next. The next morning, James called with news. "David came to my office first thing today," he said. "He wants to negotiate." "What did you tell him?" I asked, cradling my coffee mug for comfort. "I told him that the terms in the divorce papers are non-negotiable regarding the house, but that we might be flexible on other aspects if he agrees to an amicable and swift resolution." "And?" He seemed relieved, actually. I think he was expecting a much bigger fight. He mentioned that Patricia wanted him to contest everything, but he doesn't seem to have the stomach for it. James paused. "He also asked about the trust Richard set up for you. I think that's what really convinced him not to fight, knowing that Richard had anticipated this scenario and had prepared for it." "Did he say anything about Vanessa?" I couldn't help asking. James hesitated. "He did mention that their relationship is complicated now. Apparently, she's not thrilled about the financial implications of his divorce. It seems she was banking on a substantial windfall from the house sale." I felt a hollow satisfaction at that. Vanessa had been happy to pursue a married man when she thought he came with financial security and social status. Now that those were in question, her enthusiasm was waning. "What happens next?" I asked. "David has agreed to sign the papers as drafted. He's asked for 2 weeks to move his things out of the house and find a new place to live. I advised that you might want to be elsewhere during that time, just to avoid unnecessary confrontation." I agreed, relieved that I wouldn't have to watch David pack up his life and leave ours behind. My friend Claire offered her guest room, and I gratefully accepted. Before leaving the house, I took inventory of our shared possessions and packed away the most valuable or sentimental items for safekeeping. I didn't think David would take anything that wasn't his, but I also hadn't thought he'd try to sell our house without my consent. The 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. I went to work, spent evenings with Claire, and tried not to think too much about what was happening at home. Rachel kept watch on the house, reporting that David came by several times with boxes, and that Patricia visited once but left quickly after what appeared to be an argument with her son. When I finally returned home, it was both exactly the same and fundamentally different. David had taken his clothes, his personal items, the electronics he'd brought into the marriage, and a few pieces of furniture we'd bought together. He'd left behind all the wedding gifts, the family photos, and anything that had belonged to Richard. In the master bedroom, I found a note on my pillow. "Sam, I'm sorry things ended this way. You deserved better than what I gave you. Dad was right to protect you from us. I see that now. David." It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was an acknowledgement, and that was more than I had expected. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. True to his word, David didn't contest any of the terms. The house was officially mine alone now, along with a fair financial settlement that included half of our joint savings, minus the amount he'd diverted, and a portion of his company shares. Another gift from Richard that I hadn't known about until James explained it. Patricia, however, wasn't ready to concede defeat. She tried multiple approaches to undermine me, spreading rumors in their social circle, attempting to challenge the trust Richard had established, even showing up at my workplace once to make a scene. None of it worked. Richard's legal preparations were too thorough, and frankly, most people had never much liked Patricia anyway. Her behavior only served to isolate her further, even from her own son. David, to his credit, kept his distance and honored the terms of our divorce. I heard through mutual friends that he and Vanessa had broken up shortly after our divorce was finalized. Apparently, she'd found someone else, someone whose financial future seemed more secure. I couldn't find it in myself to feel sorry for him. He had made his choices, just as I had made mine. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into David at a local coffee shop. It was awkward, but not hostile. He looked tired, older somehow. "The house looks good," he said after we'd exchanged uncomfortable pleasantries. "I drove by last week. You've planted new flowers in the front beds." "Yes," I replied. "Peonies. Your father always said they'd do well there." David nodded, his expression softening at the mention of Richard. Dad always did have a good eye for those things. He hesitated, then added, "I'm leaving the firm, starting fresh with a smaller company across town." "Oh?" I was genuinely surprised. The firm had been his life, his identity. "Yeah, too many ghosts at Bennett Investment, and Mom's still on the board. It's been difficult." He gave a wry smile. "Turns out Dad was right about a lot of things." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. "Anyway," David continued, "I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve any of it. This time it was a real apology, the one I'd been waiting for without realizing it." "Thank you," I said simply. We parted ways after that, both a little lighter perhaps. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. What he'd done was too calculated, too hurtful for that. But it was closure, and that was enough. As autumn turned to winter and then to spring, I found myself settling into a new rhythm of life. The house that had once been ours gradually became truly mine as I rearranged furniture, repainted rooms, and made the space reflect my own tastes and preferences. I kept Richard's study largely intact, though I did add my own books to his shelves and replaced his desk chair with one better suited to my frame. It became my favorite room in the house, a place where I felt both his protective presence and my growing independence. Work became a source of satisfaction and advancement. Without the constant drain of managing David's emotions and Patricia's interference, I found new energy for my career. I took on more challenging projects, mentored junior editors, and even began discussions about eventually starting my own imprint. My social life expanded too. Friends who had drifted away during my marriage, some because they saw what I couldn't see in David, others because Patricia had subtly made them feel unwelcome, returned to my life. I made new connections through work and through a community garden project I joined. For the first time in years, I felt fully myself, not defined by my relationship to the Bennett family. Patricia, meanwhile, continued her campaign against me, though with diminishing returns. She tried to pressure mutual acquaintances into taking sides, but most people saw through her tactics. She attempted to contest Richard's trust again, hiring a new attorney who specialized in trust disputes, but James easily countered their arguments. Her most desperate move came almost a year after the divorce, when she somehow obtained a key to the house, likely kept by David from his final packing day, and let herself in while I was at work. I came home to find her in Richard's study, going through his desk drawers. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" I demanded, startling her so badly she dropped the papers she was holding. "Looking for the truth," she said, recovering quickly. "There must be something here. Some evidence that Richard never intended for you to have this house permanently." "There isn't," I said, already dialing the police on my cell phone. "Because that's not the truth. Richard wanted me to have security, no matter what happened with David. He told me so himself, and he put it in writing." "You turned him against us," Patricia accused. "Against his own family. You and your feminine wiles." "Stop," I interrupted. "Just stop, Patricia." Richard was a smart, perceptive man who saw exactly what was happening in his family. He loved David, but he wasn't blind to his faults or to your influence over him. The police arrived minutes later. Patricia tried to claim that she had a right to be there as the mother of the former owner, but the officers weren't impressed. They escorted her out with a warning about trespassing, and I immediately called a locksmith to change all the locks. That evening, I received an unexpected call from David. "I heard what happened with Mom," he said without preamble. "I'm sorry. I've taken her key and made it clear that she's never to try anything like that again." "Thank you," I said, surprised by his intervention. "But how did you hear about it?" "Officer Daniels is an old friend," he explained. "He recognized the address and gave me a call, thought I should know." We talked for a few more minutes. David seemed different, more thoughtful, less defensive. He mentioned that he was seeing a therapist, trying to understand the patterns in his life, particularly his relationship with his mother. "I let her control too much," he admitted. "Not just with you, but with everything. I'm trying to change that." After we hung up, I sat in Richard's study, thinking about growth and change and the long shadows family can cast on our lives. David was making an effort to break free of Patricia's influence, to become his own person. It was more than I had expected from him. A week later, a package arrived at my door, a thick manila envelope with David's handwriting on the label. Inside was a stack of letters, all addressed to me but never sent, along with a brief note. "Found these in Dad's personal safe at the office. Thought you should have them. D." The letters were from Richard, written during the last months of his life. He must have given David instructions to deliver them to me after his death, instructions that Patricia had likely intercepted. Each letter was dated, starting about 3 months before he passed away. I spent the evening reading them, tears streaming down my face. They were full of fatherly advice, memories he wanted to share, and concerns about the future. He wrote about his hopes for David, his worries about Patricia's influence, and his deep affection for me. In the final letter, dated just a week before he died, Richard wrote, "I've taken steps to protect you, Samantha, because I've come to see you as the daughter I never had. The house is yours, no matter what happens. The trust will ensure you're never without resources. I hope these precautions prove unnecessary. I hope David becomes the man I've always believed he could be, but if not, know that you have a home and a future that can't be taken from you. Live well, my dear. Be happy. That's all I've ever wanted for both of you." Those letters became a treasure to me, a connection to the man who had seen value in me when his own family couldn't. I kept them in a special box in Richard's, now my study, reading them whenever I needed guidance or comfort. As the second year after my divorce began, I found myself finally ready to consider dating again. I was cautious, still healing from the betrayal, but also hopeful. A colleague introduced me to her brother, Michael, a landscape architect with kind eyes and a patient manner. Our first date was coffee. Our second, a walk through the botanical gardens where he pointed out his favorite plants and listened attentively to my stories. It was nothing like the whirlwind romance I'd had with David. It was slower, more thoughtful, built on genuine conversation and shared interests rather than charm and intensity. We took our time getting to know each other, both of us carrying past relationships that had taught us the value of proceeding with care. When I finally invited Michael to my home for dinner, 6 months into our relationship, I gave him a tour that ended in Richard's study. "This room feels different from the rest of the house," Michael observed. "It has a different energy." "It belonged to my former father-in-law," I explained. "He was a remarkable man. This was his sanctuary, and now it's mine." I told Michael the story then, not all at once, but in pieces over dinner and afterward, as we sat in the living room with glasses of wine. I told him about David and Patricia, about their betrayal and Richard's foresight. I showed him the special clause in the deed and explained how it had saved me. "Richard sounds like he was an exceptional person," Michael said when I'd finished. "I wish I could have met him." "Me too," I said. "He would have liked you." Michael reached over and took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Thank you for sharing this with me. I know it can't have been easy to trust again after what happened." "It wasn't," I admitted. "But I'm learning. Slowly." As spring turned to summer, my life continued to evolve. I was promoted to executive editor at the publishing house. Michael and I grew closer, our relationship deepening into something I could see lasting. The house became a place of new memories, not just reminders of what had been lost. Patricia made one last attempt to assert control that summer. She approached the board of Bennett Investment with allegations that I had manipulated Richard in his final days, convincing him to alter his will and set up the trust. The board, composed mostly of Richard's longtime friends and colleagues, dismissed her claims immediately. One board member, Caroline Hayes, reached out to me afterward. "Richard talked about you often," she told me over lunch. "He was so proud of the woman his son had married. He saw in you all the qualities he had hoped David would develop: intelligence, integrity, compassion." The board remembers those conversations. No one believed Patricia's accusations for a moment. It was the final vindication, though I hadn't known I still needed it. Patricia's influence at the firm was permanently diminished after that failed gambit. She still held her seat on the board, but it was largely ceremonial now, with real decisions made without her input. 3 years after the day I discovered David and Patricia's plan to sell my home, I stood in the backyard watching guests mingle on the patio and lawn. It was a perfect summer evening, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of the roses I'd planted along the garden wall. String lights twinkled overhead, casting a soft glow as twilight deepened. The occasion was twofold: my 35th birthday and my engagement to Michael. We had decided to make it official 2 weeks earlier, on a weekend trip to the coast. It hadn't been a surprise exactly. We had been discussing marriage for months, talking through our hopes and expectations, learning from our past relationships what we wanted to build together. "You look happy," said a voice beside me. I turned to find James, Richard's old friend and my attorney, smiling at me. He had become a trusted advisor and friend during the divorce and after. "I am," I replied, and meant it. "Genuinely happy." "Richard would be pleased," James said, glancing around at the gathering. "This is what he wanted for you. Security, yes, but also joy." My gaze moved across the yard, taking in the faces of friends and colleagues, Michael's family who had welcomed me warmly, even a few people who had been part of my life with David, but had chosen to maintain their connection with me after the divorce. And there, standing somewhat awkwardly at the edge of the patio, was David himself. I had hesitated before including him on the guest list, but it had felt right somehow. Our paths still crossed occasionally through mutual friends, and over time, a cautious friendliness had developed between us. Not friendship exactly, but something less fraught than our initial post-divorce interactions. He caught my eye and raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. I nodded in return. He looked better than he had in the early days after our split. Healthier, more at peace. I'd heard that he was doing well at his new firm and had recently started dating someone who seemed to make him happy. Patricia, of course, was not invited. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt, some wounds wouldn't heal. She had made her final attempt to contact me 6 months earlier, sending a letter that oscillated between veiled accusations and insincere apologies. I had read it once, then filed it away without response. There was nothing left to say between us. Michael joined me, slipping his arm around my waist. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my momentary preoccupation. "Everything's perfect," I assured him, leaning into his solid presence, just reflecting on the journey that brought me here. Later, as guests gathered on the patio for toasts, I found myself standing next to the rose bush I had planted on the first anniversary of Richard's death. It had thrived, producing abundant blooms each year, as he had predicted it would. When it was my turn to speak, I raised my glass and looked out at the faces of the people who had supported me, believed in me, and helped me rebuild. 3 years ago, I thought I had lost everything that mattered, I began. My marriage, my home, my sense of security. What I didn't realize then was that I was actually finding myself, my strength, my resilience, and ultimately, my joy. I glanced at the rosebush, a silent tribute to the man whose foresight had given me the foundation to rebuild. Someone very wise once told me that a house is more than walls and a roof. It's a place where you can be truly yourself, where you can put down roots and grow. I'm grateful every day for this home, and even more grateful that I now get to share it with someone who understands its value and its history. Michael squeezed my hand, his eyes reflecting the same happiness I felt. "To new beginnings," I concluded, raising my glass higher, "and to the wisdom of those who help us find our way there." As glasses clinked and conversations resumed, I took a moment to look around at the home that had become my sanctuary, my triumph, and now the foundation for a new chapter of my life. The house that Patricia had tried to take from me had become something far more important than a piece of property. It was the place where I had discovered my own worth, separate from anyone else's estimation. In the end, the house that was meant to break me had instead made me stronger. The betrayal that should have devastated me had ultimately freed me, and the love I had lost had made room for a deeper, truer connection that I might never have found otherwise. As evening deepened into night and stars appeared overhead, I stood in the garden of the home that was unquestionably mine, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. Whatever challenges the future might hold, I would face them with the confidence of someone who had been tested and had emerged not just intact, but transformed. Richard had given me more than a house. He had given me the chance to discover that I was capable of building a home and a life on my own terms. It was a gift I would never forget and would always honor by living with the same integrity and foresight he had shown. In the quiet moments of that perfect summer night, I silently thanked him once more, knowing that in some way, he was still watching over the home and the woman he had cherished enough to protect.